All right, so I think really the weakness we saw in the markets was after that information report on Oracle not being as profitable as a lot of analysts thought it was going to be, maybe even losing some money on NVIDIA chips. Does that change the momentum of the AI trade and I guess by default the market in a meaningful way?
No, I think you look intermediate term, you look long term at what's happening here with the AI revolution. It's hard to come up with a reason that you don't experience long-term growth here. Of course, you're going to have volatility. Of course, you're going to have outsized volatility in some cases relative to the broader market when we talk about technology and AI in general.
All right. You're talking about the broader market. We have seen a bit of the market broadening. What do you attribute that to? And is that sustainable as we potentially go into a rate cut later on this month?
Yeah, well, you have the Fed here kind of making things a little bit easier for equity investors. You have, I think, the market looking at 3% inflation as the new norm instead of 2%. So things seem to be stabilizing on the heels of decent earnings as well. There's still momentum here. There's still a pretty good picture ahead of us.
All right, if it's easier for equity investors, why is gold at a record? Why is Bitcoin touching a record? Pull back a bit right now.
Sure.
Why are people going into these, quote unquote, safe haven assets and hypothetically moving away from the equity market, at least in part?
Because there's a part of this where investors believe that maybe the US dollar is becoming more and more weak, and that is something that concerns them. You go into hard assets like gold and Bitcoin as a hedge against that. I think you can separate the story a little bit between gold and Bitcoin, something that's more technology and another thing that's that classic hedge against inflation. They're still believers here that inflation will run hot, so you go to gold. You go to these safe havens, maybe as a hedge to that bet on equities.
Are retail investors playing a part in this, specifically when we're talking about Bitcoin and gold? There has been a lot of uncertainty here in the U.S., the shutdown, tariffs, a lot of other things. I was also speaking to Charles Schwab's head trader. He said investors, they're still buying NVIDIA. They're not buyers of NVIDIA, but they're selling some other parts of the AI adjacent trades. What part do you think that they're playing in this whole narrative that we're seeing play out in the market in recent days?
I mean, the retail investor has more of a role than ever before, and that's because we have platforms in which investors can access the capital markets in ways. So it's really hard for me to say, hey, this is 100% or the majority of it's driven by retail investors, but they're here to stay. They're doing their due diligence, they're doing their research, and they're putting trades through more than ever before. So don't knock the retail investor.
Do you think more money is going into the private markets, and that could potentially be troublesome, at least for the equity market going into Q4? Because we keep getting these announcements related to the private markets, OpenAI, XAI with NVIDIA making a deal in them. Do you think that more of that money on the retail side, obviously this would be accredited investors, is going to go to those private names and maybe away from the equity market?
Yeah, I think there's going to be more action there. Again, it's about more access to broader markets, whether that's public or private. You will continue to see capital flow into places that normally were not available to some investors. I think even for accredited investors, you're going to see more retail investors get into that space as these rules change.
All right, big question I'm sure your clients are asking. This very slight dip, we got to remember the markets are still trading very close to all-time highs. It's like this. Is this viable? Should you be buying into this, or should you wait for some of this uncertainty to resolve itself?
So not a big fan of market timing whatsoever. If you have a long-term time horizon, always be buying. Always, have a controlled way of getting your capital into appreciating assets so you can quietly compound over the long term.